So picture this. You walk into a room feeling completely fine, like you're having a perfectly good day. And then 20 minutes later, you're just irritated. You're stressed, you're miserable, and you literally have no idea why. Has that ever happened to you?
Well, what if that emotion didn't actually start with you? Think about it. If the people around you can influence what you feel, how you think, and eventually how you behave, how much of you is actually being shaped by your environment? Okay, let's dive into this because science actually has a name for this invisible transfer. It's called emotional contagion. It's the automatic transmission of emotions from one person to another. Think about that one friend who complains about everyone, right? At first, you barely even notice it, but months later, you realize you're complaining about the exact same things. Why do we start talking, reacting, or even complaining like the people around us? It's basically a quiet, automatic transferring of a baseline mood.
But let's push this a little further. We know everyday complaints can rub off on us, sure. But what about deeper physical states? Like, can someone else's physiological stress, a true physical panic state, literally become your stress? And this brings us to stress contagion. So, in a truly fascinating 2014 study, researchers from UC San Francisco and NYU set out to investigate exactly this. And to do it, they looked at one of the tightest biological bonds in nature, mothers and their 12 to 14-month-old infants. The absolute brilliance of this study is in the setup. First, the researchers completely separated the mothers and the infants, put them in different rooms. Then, they induced stress in the mothers. After that, they reunited the dyad, the mother and baby, and finally, they measured the physiological responses of both. So the absolutely crucial point to remember here is that during the stressful event itself, the infants were nowhere near their mothers. So, how did they stress these mothers out? Well, they had them give a 5-minute speech to a panel of evaluators. And here's the catch. Some mothers received a positive evaluation. The evaluators smiled, nodded, leaned forward, looked engaged, but others got a negative evaluation. The evaluators frowned, crossed their arms, and just shook their heads. There was also a control group who just spoke alone in a room. Now, this brilliantly highlights the core mystery of the whole experiment. During all of this intense, sweaty palm stress happening to the moms, the infants were in a completely different room. When they were finally reunited, those babies had absolutely zero idea what their mothers had just gone through. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happened the exact moment these infants were placed back with their mothers. It's incredible. Their heart rates physically mirrored their mother's stress state. Without ever seeing the stressful event, without knowing what happened, their tiny nervous systems just synced up. Let's actually look at the exact numbers here. For the infants whose mothers had just faced that negative, frowning evaluation, their heart rates spiked by an average of 5.76 beats per minute compared to the control group. That is wild. They didn't just sense the negative stress in the room, they literally caught it. But it wasn't just this invisible, internal heart rate spike either. The infant's actual physical behavior changed. During a later phase of the study, these babies actually displayed physical avoidance behaviors towards strangers. They averted their gaze, they twisted their bodies away, and showed this distinct wariness, all because they caught their mother's negative mood. Now, this is where things get kind of uncomfortable. The researchers tracked this physiological synchronization over time, and what they found is quite unsettling. The physiological covariation between the negative evaluation mothers and their infants didn't just fade away as they sat together, it actually grew stronger. The longer they shared the same space, the more entangled their physical stress became. But, this isn't just about babies. It's about social learning for all of us. It's about how we acquire behaviors and emotional baselines just by observing and interacting with others. I want you to think about the last person you spent a lot of time with. Have you noticed yourself maybe adopting their traits, or their anxieties, or their moods? It really forces us to ask a rather uncomfortable question. Are we choosing our environment, or is our environment quietly choosing who we become? Are you truly in control of your own attitudes, or are repeated interactions with your peers quietly rewiring your physiological baselines without you even realizing it? Now, long before we had electrocardiograms to measure heart rate variability, authors and philosophers actually noticed this exact pattern of human contagion. They observed it in royal courts, in business, just in daily life.
So this isn't some brand new phenomenon. It's actually a historical framework for a very deep psychological truth.
And this is exactly where Robert Greene's famous book, The 48 Laws of Power, becomes incredibly relevant to our explainer today. Greene outlines Law 10, which warns, very simply, avoid the unhappy and unlucky. But if you look beneath that provocative wording, there's a question that psychology can actually investigate. How much of the people around us ends up becoming part of us? Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that this isn't about magic. And it certainly isn't about avoiding people who are just poor or experiencing a stroke of bad luck. It's really about emotional gravity. It's the very real science that the people we repeatedly surround ourselves with fundamentally alter our emotional world, our expectations, and our daily habits.
Think back to that constantly complaining friend we talked about earlier. Why does spending time with a negative person sometimes change the way you see literally everything? What happened to your mood after that conversation? Did they explicitly convince you to become negative? Or did you simply spend enough time around negativity for it to start feeling entirely normal?
You see, our emotions are not walled gardens. They are open ecosystems. So I'll leave you with this. If emotions can spread this easily, if your heart rate can literally spike just by sitting next to someone who is stressed, what else can we accidentally catch from other people?